Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to all West Shore Photography Club members and any guests that might be with us this evening. It is February the 21st, 2022, and I am your host, tonight's presenter, and the club president, Dennis Baker. So, welcome. Happy All Presidents Day, and for those of you who are wondering, why are we having a meeting tonight? It's a national holiday. Well, there's two reasons. One is we didn't meet last week. It was Valentine's Day. And Joe and I thought it would be more important not to meet on Valentine's Day because you might have your romantic things in mind. And the other reason was because I'm real eager to do this presentation tonight. So we didn't want to go 2 weeks in a row with not having a meeting. I want to take a minute to once again thank Vice President Joe Farrell for filling in for me. Those of you who follow me on Facebook know that my wife and I were in the Caribbean for 24 days. We did 3 trips back and forth between Fort Lauderdale and the Caribbean. Had a great time. But Joe kept things going seamlessly, ran the meetings, sent all the communications. And like I say, if you didn't follow me on Facebook, you wouldn't even know that I was gone. He filled in and did everything very, very well. So thank you very much, Joe. I really appreciate it. Announcement for you. Rich Hudson, are you on board tonight? Let me check. Rich is our, there we go. I'll ask you to say something in just a minute. Rich is our new treasurer. Give Rich a round of applause. All right. Thanks, Rich.
Sure.
Mary filled in the interim till we came across Rich. Rich is an accountant. 30 years experience, did you say?
Yep.
Oh, I didn't think it was that long. Because I know Rich from high school. I was assistant principal at Mechanicsburg when he was a student. And don't tell me he's been an accountant for 30 years. That just doesn't seem possible. So I'll send you Rich's contact information tomorrow in the follow-up email. But Rich, go ahead and introduce yourself and say a few things.
Yeah, I'm Rich Hudson. I've went to Mechanicsburg High School, married for 28 years, been in the accounting field for close to 30, and I'm excited to get more involved in the club.
So thank you. We really appreciate it. Okay, now let's talk a little bit. Very good. Let's talk a little bit about the upcoming print exhibit. I'm certainly excited about this. We have a reception. Everyone is invited to the reception on Friday, March the 4th, from 6 o'clock until 7:30. You don't have to stay the whole time, of course, but there are going to be some dignitaries there. You're welcome to bring friends, relatives, anybody you can drag in there. There's plenty of room. There'll be light refreshments. Just brief remarks, okay? We have 49 prints from 20 different members ready to go, So it should be great. Janice Links, the executive director of the West Shore Historical Society, has been promoting this thing like crazy. She's trying to get, important people there to say a few words. And she got Joe and I lined up for the radio show. I don't know if you listened to us yesterday, but we were on Bob Carey's Garden Talk radio show on W1000 or W100 AM radio station. And went very well. I took Joe along for support. And between the two of us, we made it through the show without embarrassing ourselves. I think so. Right, Joe?
Yeah, I think so.
It went very well. So the exhibit is going to be up then at the Art Center School and Galleries of Mechanicsburg until the end of March 31st. And that, of course, if you haven't been there, you can Google it, but the address is 18 Art Craft Drive, Mechanicsburg. It's just about 3 miles west of Mechanicsburg on Route 641. It's off to the right as you're headed toward Carlisle. It looks like a big old barn because it used to be a big old barn. Okay, so Joe's going to tell us about the upcoming events, trips, and tell you what's on store for next week. Joe, it's yours.
Okay, we just finished off our 2 trips this past week to Middle Creek on Wednesday and on Saturday. And if you're onto Facebook, even if you just look, you can see that there were quite a few wonderful images that people captured. We had really good weather both days. And so we got sunrise, and I mean, it just was really pretty spectacular. But that is not over at all yet. You can, for the next month, you're going to be able to go down there and photograph. The geese are coming in a little bit later than they normally do, and there's a lot on the lake right now, which is great. And I would recommend strongly that you either go there early in the morning or in the evening. If you can get some during the day, but you have to hunt for them. So I would recommend those two things, morning or evening, and that's what we did this past week.
Hey, no biggie. No biggie.
Okay, well, that reminds me that I'm going to mute everybody. I'll do that here quickly.
And on Wednesday, we have our trip to the state capitol. That's going to be at 9 o'clock sharp. We'll be there from 9 to about 11:30. You could leave really anytime after 11 o'clock. We will have a lunch in the cafeteria if you want to. That's completely optional. But this year, we're going to be going to the Senate chambers, the House chambers, the Supreme Court we're going to be going to, and then in the rotunda. So we have a lot to photograph. There's going to be a lot of people there. This is going to be a real good turnout event. And this is one of the signature events that really was one of the things that helped make our club great as it is. So that's for Wednesday. The next Monday night, we have Betsy Wilson. Betsy is going to be talking to us about still life. And as she says, this is not about the flowers, the fruit in a bowl and the flowers in a vase. This is very unique kind of still lifes that she's going to do. She's going to show us how to do light painting, but she's also going to be giving us a lot of inspiration so we can try different things. And it's very appropriate because it may be still cold in the next couple of weeks, and we can do this at home if we want to. So we're going to have that. That's be for next Monday night.
Yeah, now that's a change from the previously published schedule, right, Joe?
Yes, and actually we're changing the schedules. We have to be fluid. And because we can get speakers, for instance, we're going to have Jürgen from up in Boston is going to do a night photography for urban. He's coming up on the agenda. So he has certain time slots that he can get in. So we have to move things around, and we're constantly doing that to fill up the schedules. So, but
I will update the schedule of events and publish that probably tomorrow.
Yeah. So that's the scoop.
That's a scoop. Very good. Thank you, Joe. Now we'll mute everybody. And I'm going to share my screen, and we'll get started with the presentation here shortly. Okay. I have always been interested in this idea of perception versus seeing, how the human brain works, well, how the eyes and the brain work in conjunction. And people have often said, well, the camera works like the camera works like your eye. Well, in some regards it does, but in many regards it doesn't. So I've been researching this for quite a while, and it relates to optical illusions and a lot of things, as you'll see. And I started putting a presentation together that I thought I would do sometime, months ago, and I've been revising this thing. And I've already committed to do this for the Redlands, California Camera Club sometime in April. So this is the first time I'm doing this presentation for a group. So what I'm asking is that you give me some feedback, okay? Just take a minute after the presentation or tomorrow. Here's my email address on the next slide, and give me some comments. And if you can, the more specific you can be, the better. I mean, stuff like, did you learn something? Okay, if you didn't learn anything, then I wasted my time. Was it interesting? I hope so. What suggestions do you have? Was it too long, too short, too many examples, not enough examples? You get the idea. So if you please, everybody, if you please take a minute and give me your feedback. There's my email address. All right. Joe asked me to do one other thing. We're curious, before I get on with the program, about how many people use Facebook or check Facebook, our group, for announcements. Like he put an announcement on just the other day about the trip to the Capitol and about Middle Creek. So in chat, would you go to chat? You'll find the button down around the edges of your screen somewhere. Go to chat and just put yes or no. Yes, you check Facebook regularly. or no, you don't. And we'll get some feedback from the 50 people that are here. And Patty Volpe already knows, she checks it constantly. All right. Well, we human beings are able to recognize danger, and it's a natural thing. That's the only way we'll survive. We have to recognize dangers quickly, assess the situation. And if you think it's only from primitive times, no, think about driving a car. When you drive a car, you better be pretty instinctive and recognize if there's a danger and react to that very quickly. So how are we able to do that? Well, through the evolutionary process, our brains have developed this technique, and it does it mainly by recognizing objects very quickly. And it recognizes them as a whole object. So unless we take the time to analyze and look carefully, you don't notice, the mane so much on that lion that's rushing towards you. You don't notice the eyes and the color of the eyes. You're just saying, I got to get the heck out of here before I get eaten alive. Okay. Or I got to swerve to avoid that car. What kind of car was it? Well, I don't know. And that's one of the reasons that I read an article years ago from Scientific American where they questioned eyewitness reports, the validity. And the police have a real problem with this because we're so intent on recognizing a danger and avoiding the danger that we don't see the details. Oh, I got out of the way of that car, but I ran into the fire hydrant. Well, what kind of car was it? Well, I don't know. What color was it? Well, I think it was yellow, but it might have been blue. Who was driving it, a man or a woman? I don't know. I just saw this big car coming toward me and I got out of the way. So we recognize danger, but we don't necessarily recognize detail. And the other part of this, our world is so complex. Psychological studies have shown that when you look at anything, you can look in the room around you, you don't notice much about that room unless there's a mouse crawling around in the corner. You'll notice that. Or if your cat jumps up on the table, you'll notice that. But you don't see the things, the detailed things that are there. And there's a lot of detail there. So to look at the detail, you have to focus on it. You have to concentrate, pay attention, because only that fovea, that center part of your retina that's most sensitive, is where the clarity comes in. That's the only part of your vision that's clear. So if you want to see something, you have to specifically look, at that lens over there in the shelf that I have. Or that stapler over there. Or there. Okay. It takes effort to do that. Okay. We usually see the whole more than we do the parts. So this ability to recognize dangers quickly has serious implications for us as photographers, and they're not all good. Okay. Unless we can take the time to look carefully, we're going to miss things. So when we talk about seeing or seeing photographs, that's a skill that we develop. We practice it by concentrating, by number one, ignoring distractions. Okay. And number two, looking at details. Okay. Looking at the little things. How many times have you been on a photo shoot with somebody and you look at the pictures they post somewhere on Facebook group and you say, I didn't see that. Or where was that? One of the biggest compliments I used to get at weddings was they'd look at the picture. Oh, you got that. I didn't see that happening. Where'd that little girl? And it's so cute. It's a matter of being aware of things. At an athletic event, most of the people focus on the field. What about the stuff going on the sidelines? What about the cheerleaders? What about the fans? There's a lot to be had, but we have to force ourselves to notice those things and realize that they have photographic potential. What's that? I'll take a minute. Maybe you've seen this before. Some of the stuff I'm going to show you tonight, has been around the internet for a long, long time. And you're going to, oh yeah, I know what that is. And some of it you're going to say intuitively, well, that's silly. Everybody knows you do that. Yeah, but I'm looking through a focused lens here, if you don't mind that analogy, putting it in this context. So go with the flow, if you will. Have you decided, do you know what that is? Here, let me give you a hint. Yeah, a little bit of a hint. Even though it's a bunch of black splotches on a white piece of paper or white screen, that's what you see. That's what's there, okay? But the key of this presentation is what your brain perceives is not always what's there. How do you get a Dalmatian out of that? It's not a Dalmatian. It's a bunch of blotches on a white screen. Your brain puts the pieces together because you've seen a Dalmatian dog before. And it puts that together into a whole instead of the individual parts. Pretty amazing, I think. Perception versus seeing. Okay, what's actually there are spots. What you perceive is a Dalmatian dog. Ha, ha, ha. So, what geometric figures are partially hidden? Okay, take a look at it in a minute, and everybody will be able to tell me. Okay, you see blue circles, and you see a green rectangle. Is that what's actually there? No. Okay, analyze it. There looks like a Pac-Man. You know, the blue circles look like Pac-Man, Pac-Man at the four corners, and then you have little green. Okay, but your brain perceives what it thinks is the situation. It thinks in reality, oh, there's like a white sheet of paper over top of those. If you pull back the white sheet of paper, ta-da, I'm going to have a green rectangle, a green square actually, and four blue circles. Okay, that's our brain perceiving what it thinks. It's analyzing the situation very quickly and telling you, oh, that's what I think is there, more than what is actually there. Now, Mary, it's your turn. Would you unmute? Oh, she's unmuted herself already. I asked Mary to read this paragraph for us, and I didn't tell her what it was or send it to her in advance. Okay, but let's see how she does. Go ahead, Mary.
Thanks. According to a research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter are in the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole.
Thank you. Thank you. Isn't that incredible? I mean, look at how the misspellings, look at it. It's a mess, but she could still put it together. And if you're a speed reader, that's part of the technique that they teach you to speed read is don't look at individual letters. Don't look at individual words. Look at the whole thing and put it all together at one time. Okay. Just incredible. Was that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it's a good thing. She was able to read it. Well, try this example. And Mary, you don't have to read this, but everybody take a look at this one and see if you can get an answer to this one. You see the mistake? Okay, somebody unmute themselves and tell me what the mistake is. How many proofreaders do we have in the group?
Mistake spelled wrong.
Oh, is it?
No,
yeah. How do you spell mistake?
Oh, I guess not.
The.
What?
It's the.
The. Yes.
Yeah.
Can you find the mistake? Now, that was difficult to do for a lot of people.
Yeah, mistakes in bold print.
Exactly.
Right to it.
And then the letters are in numbers, so the numbers are in color, so they draw your attention, but there's two thes. So your brain, again, perceived the whole thing, and immediately you had the message, but you didn't have it exactly as it was written. So this is what makes proofreading so difficult. Okay, you can have mistakes and you read right over them the next time, without seeing them at all. Even somebody you might ask to help to proofread can run into a similar type of problem. Okay, so your brain's interpreting what it thinks should be there instead of what it is actually there. Okay, let's look at some other examples. I'm going to show you a slide for just about 1 second, up real quickly and then off the screen. And I just want you to give your first impression of what you see. Okay, here we go. Did you see 37? Oh, that was really quick, wasn't it? Did you see 37 black dots? I bet not. You did, for one thing, you didn't have time. You saw dots, but you didn't have time to count them. So you certainly don't know that there were 37 or how many there were. Did you pretty much see a straight line, a straight black line? That's what most people would say. Your brain puts it together. It connects the dots and boom. Okay, let's try another one. Okay, same thing. Did you see 29 dots? Yeah. Okay, you probably saw curved lines. Okay, because again, your brain's putting together, it's connecting the dots. You saw a curvy X. Okay, so you connect the dots. There's no line, so we call this, it's an implied line. And as photographers, we're familiar with implied lines. Of course, that's where I'm going with this presentation. We'll get to some actual photographs here in just a minute. So psychologists refer to this tendency to connect the dots as the continuity principle. Okay, I didn't have to tell you that, but I figured some people would be curious, and it is a well-known concept, has a name. So continuity principle. As photographers, we can take advantage of implied lines. They help us lead our viewers into the frame, into the scene, and they give our images a sense of depth. Okay, this is the subway in St. Petersburg, Russia, and you see the leading lines that converge at the top of the tunnel in the back there, okay, up here. And it gives the image a real sense of depth, leads you right in from the foreground there. And of course, you got this girl in the front who catches your attention and then leads you right back into there. And the lines appear to converge. They have a vanishing point back in here and gives the photograph a real feeling of depth. Here you have some leading lines too. It's a little different, and they're not really effective compositionally. Here's why. Okay, you see where the lines go? Okay, right out of the picture, right out of the frame. So yeah, those houses, the houses are like the dots, and you connect the dots, and your eye sees an implied line that goes from the left to the right. Does your eye see an implied line that goes from the right to the left? No, probably not, because we in this society read from left to right. So, and plus the houses are closer to you on the left. So you're probably going to pick it up at the lower left and you're going to sweep across, but then unfortunately, boom, your eye goes right out of the composition. That's not the best thing compositionally, because we try, as photographers, we try to create a composition that captures the eye and keeps it within the frame. So it would be good if there was something over here and down here to bring your eye, pull your eye back in and bring it around. Okay. Studies have shown that people look at pictures for only a few seconds at a time. And if there's something interesting about them that captures their attention and keeps them within the frame and causes the mind to think a little bit, they'll stick with it. They'll engage with the image a little bit more. But if it's a simplistic image and there's not much, there's no puzzle to figure out, people look at it and they move on. So the goal, I think, for us as photographers to make our images interesting is to create compositions that are a little bit more complex and take a little time to figure out without being so complex that they're frustrating that people give up. Because if somebody looks at it and says, it's an abstract, and they look at it for a while and say, I give up. I have no idea what it is, and they move on. But if they get a hint, there's a little something there, they can say, oh, they stick with it and say, I think that maybe, yeah, okay. Here's another example. This is a cultural center in Iceland, and we have all these leading lines, coming around. Well, here they are. They're the leading lines. Bring you right into the center, and even the lines in the clouds bring you right in, and boom, it's in the center of the composition. So it's what we call a static composition, but those lines certainly draw you in. Another example, this was in, where was this? I wrote it down, but I can't see my notes right now. Anyway, the leading lines, right there. Okay, so anytime that you can follow an edge or follow the stream back this way, lead you, you can refer to that as an implied line. Even the edge of the tops of the trees take you back to the castle. So implied lines. In this case, this is a rather effective use of leading lines, because the lines take you to the subject. So you get rewarded. The viewer gets rewarded for following the lines back to the castle. And then you go, oh, there it is. There's something there. What people do a lot of times, I'm guilty of this too, is you'll have leading lines and you'll be real proud of yourself for capturing leading lines in the image, but then you look where the leading lines go and there's nothing there. And you go, oh, well, that's kind of disappointing. So move on. More leading lines. Okay, this was in Copenhagen, Denmark. That's where it was. Okay, there are the leading lines bringing you right back in, and the flow can go, into the image, and the cyclists are coming out, so along those planes, and again, giving the image a sense of depth. Lines and shapes are the building blocks of photographic compositions. So let's use lines and shapes to our advantage. Okay. I ask you what shape this is, and it sounds like a silly question because you say circular. Well, let's think back to what we were doing before. Do you see the entire circle? No, it's cut off here and here. But your mind perceives that those lines continue. So if I ask you what shape it is, you said a circle because you assume that it continues as a complete circle. It would be a little strange if it didn't, but you don't see a complete circle. You only see part of it. And of course, you have concentric circles, but the outer part isn't a complete circle in itself. Minor White, the famous photographer from back in the 40s, once said, you should photograph objects not only for what they are, but for what else they are. And what he was implying was that you look at something like a tree, let's say a pine tree, and I ask you what it is, you say it's a tree. And I asked another photographer what it is, and they say, oh, look, there's a triangle. Okay, so he and Ian Plant, like to talk about seeing shapes and lines. So, and Ian Plant, in his course on composition that I'm going to mention in a minute, talks about being a better photographer by seeing abstractly. Don't look at things and automatically name them objects like a door or a tree or a car. Think of them as just a shape, okay? And then use those shapes with the lines, in your composition. What do you see here? Well, you say, I see a house and a door and a bunch of windows. Well, I want you to look at it abstractly. You should be seeing rectangles and squares, lots of them. Rectangle, 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 square, and look at rectangle and then the smaller rectangles. And when these shapes repeat themselves, you get a pattern. Patterns are effective compositional, elements. Okay? So lots of shapes. And then of course you have the whole building, the frame is pretty much a square. There's so many shapes there, it's just incredible. But something to keep the eye of the viewer stimulated and keep them thinking and wondering, what's going on in this picture. There's Ian Plant. He's got a great course. It's not really expensive, and I did this like a year ago or so, the Ultimate Photographic Composition course. And he says, learning to see in the abstract is the key to making successful compositions. What do you see here? Oh, stop. You're going to tell me a church, a steeple. No, I want you to start thinking abstractly. I see a series of triangles. Okay, here's the steeple. Yes, I know it's a steeple. It's triangular shaped. And then you have the roof of the building here, the church. It's triangular shaped, another triangle back here. I know you can't see the whole triangle, and it doesn't, but your brain perceives it as a triangle because it sees the apex and the sides. It's mostly a triangle. So in terms of shapes, and then you have a bit of a congruency here, triangle, triangle, triangle. Okay. Yeah. So think in terms of shapes, not so much in actual, objects. Now, if you're a fan of Ian Plant's, you've heard him talk about visual anchors. Anything in the scene that attracts your attention, that grabs your eye, he refers to as a visual anchor. And the stronger that pull on your eye, okay, he says the greater the visual weight of the object. So in this picture in Copenhagen, we have a boat with some rowers. So that obviously attracts your attention. It's large, it's in the foreground, it's colorful. So my eye is immediately drawn here. Well, then my eye is drawn back here to this big building. Okay, so I have two visual anchors. And what does your eye, it's a good practice when you look at a picture to think about what you're doing, what you're looking at. Where's your eye going? What are the visual anchors? Okay, how does my eye move around in the image? And here, your eye is probably going back and forth between the boat and the building. Well, what does that do? Okay, there are the visual anchors. Going back and forth gives depth to the image, a sense of movement because your brain perceives this boat as moving in that direction, and it makes for a more dynamic image. Imagine this picture without the boat. Yes, you'd have leading lines. Yeah, here's a leading line. The water's a leading line. This is a leading line. And it takes you back. But look how much more interesting it is without the boat. And maybe that's what I should have done, have a picture in there without the boat. I could have taken it out in Photoshop. But two visual anchors, your eye goes back and forth, creating an implied line, giving you a sense of depth and a feeling of motion. Again, two visual anchors. This is in Copenhagen also. And your eye goes back and forth between the two. So you have some interaction there, some depth looking. And the other way you get depth is through the use of a wide angle lens, and I'm fairly close to the Canon. So look how big the Canon looks in comparison to the windmill. Okay. So if you measured them with your fingers, you would say, oh, you know, that Canon's wider than the windmill. No, it's not. You know that. Okay. Because you perceive that the windmill's further away. But the use of the wide angle lens close to the Canon distorts its size and it gives it a lot of visual weight because it makes it appear bigger than the windmill in the distance. In fact, if you had the same size Canon, an identical Canon, and it would be back here somewhere, think of how much larger this one would look than the one in the distance. And that's what gives our brains clues as to the relative size gives our brain a clue as to the relative placement, okay, in the scene and the distance away. So because the Canon's much larger and it appears closer, the windmill's smaller, appears further away. But you get that depth because your eye goes back and forth, creating an implied line between the two visual anchors. All right, what do you see? You see three dots, right? That's what's actually there. You see three dots, but I can guarantee you what you're doing, what your eye is doing, and you can't help it. Your eye is moving from one dot to the other, creating an implied line, creating a shape, a triangle. Wow, isn't that a little tricky? And you say, well, come on, that's obvious. We all know that. Yes, but let's take it step by step. In this context, think about that. You can use that to your effect, okay, in your pictures. Okay, shapes and triangles, including triangles, are very powerful compositional tools. You can arrange those shapes and the lines to give you a more dynamic composition. Lead the viewer around the photo, keep them engaged, tell your story, what's bigger, what's further away, what's closer, what's scary, what's not, and to balance your composition, to give it a good feel. Let's look at some examples. Okay, I was in a cruise ship on this one. And we have at least three visual anchors here. Okay, so your eye is drawn. If you study the picture, think about what you look at. Boom, you probably look at the sailboat in the foreground, then the house with the orange building, then the red one in the foreground, and your eye goes back and forth between the three of them. So there are the visual anchors. Your eye goes back and forth, creating implied lines that create an implied triangle. Okay, and you'll notice too that everything was moving, and I took a couple pictures, but the one I'm showing you leaves more room in the foreground here for the boat to move into the composition and give you a more comfortable feel. Okay, lines and shapes. Look at the picture. Okay, follow the scene with your eye. Where are the lines? What sort of shapes can you get? Do you see any triangles? Do you see some squares? Okay, does this help? Okay, I really like the reflection of the sailboat down here, giving you a triangle. And then the reflection to these boats, actually, there's the edge of it. And following the boats along, that gives you a triangle. And this is an applied triangle that your brain perceives. So it doesn't have to have the base down here. The base is implied. Okay, over here's a rectangle. These are leading lines, giving that, feel that sense of depth, takes you back into the picture. And you're rewarded a little bit with this building back here, which isn't overly exciting, but at least there's something there. But you have all these lines. Here, you go back to the original. Leading lines and lots, I only highlighted a couple of the shapes, but lots of shapes to look at. So when your brain, when somebody looks at that picture, they're going to be engaged with it for a little while because there's a lot to see. Okay, if it attracts their attention. Okay. Oh, what do you see? What's actually there? Let me ask that first. What's actually there? 3 red lines, right? What do you see? A triangle. It's not a triangle, but yet your brain perceives it as being a triangle because it just naturally completes what it thinks is a geometric shape. It's not a geometric shape. It's 3 independent lines that just happen to be, oriented that way. But your brain perceives it as a triangle. Okay, we can use that to our advantage, just as we did here. That's not a complete triangle down here, but your brain perceives it as being a triangle because most of the shape is there. Okay. Again, this one, you perceive it as being a circle, even though it's not a complete circle. Okay, these. You tend to look at this one. Well, it has like 3 parts to it, and it looks like 3 individual shapes, but because they're all black, they blend in together, and our brain tends to see it as one shape, just with protrusions. But watch what happens if I color these different shapes. If you make them different colors, they stand out. There's color contrast. So now it's obvious you've got a blue triangle, an orange circle, and a yellow square, okay? Which wasn't quite so obvious there, okay? So you can use the color contrast if you want. Depends what your mission is. What's your goal? If you want these to blend together and just be people to perceive them as one thing, then you overlap them, and there's no separation between the two, and there's no separation distance-wise, and there's no separation tone-wise. They're all the same color, black, okay, and there's no color. But if you want people to distinguish them as individual entities, okay, that's your goal in your picture, then you say, oh, well, I want these to be individual colors, so that people know that's a triangle. And I'm speaking abstractly. Could be people, could be statues, could be any objects within your frame if you want them to stand out as individual objects. Okay, what's that? Boom, butterfly, of course. No, it's a bunch of blotches on a piece of white paper. What makes you think it's a butterfly? Well, your brain does. Your brain perceives it as a butterfly because you've seen butterflies before, and it has that general shape. But these are really black blotches on a piece of white screen. What's that? Alfred Hitchcock, of course. Yeah. Panda bear. No, if you look at it, what's actually there? Okay, but when you put them together that way, your brain perceives it as being a panda bear. There's our dog again. Okay. So these examples illustrate the closure principle. Okay, because our brain perceives that these go together, so it imagines a completeness, a closure. Okay, it's familiar, and it helps us quickly recognize things. Okay, like a lion coming to eat your head off. Okay, what's this? It's a guy playing a banjo. Piano. No, it's not playing a piano. You can tell he's playing a guitar. Well, how do you know it's a guitar? Well, I think it's a guitar. It could be a banjo, but I see the neck. So my brain has already perceived the rest of it, and I think it's either guitar or a banjo. Yeah, one of those. Okay? Another example. So I'm imagining what the rest of it is. So this is the closure principle, for actual photographs. This is my buddy Danny, who's the keyboard player for Paul Revere's Raiders. We've traveled together, and he's playing, that's a piano. Well, how can you tell it's a piano? How can you be sure? Because you can't see the whole thing. See, it's cut off right here. Well, let's be reasonable. There's a keyboard, and it's got to be a piano, right? Unless you're playing some trick on me. So your brain knows what a piano looks like. You show it part of it. You show somebody part of the piano, and they go, that's a piano. Okay? Just like they go, Oh, that's a guitar. So compositionally, when you're shooting, you can play little games with people. You can show them part of something and let them imagine the rest. And if you really want to be devious, you can trick them. You can show them a part that looks like something, but is really something else. Okay? But most of the time, we're not being devious, but you can make it more interesting. And why would I want to show the whole piano? It's just a white top, a grand piano. It's big. It just takes up empty space. I don't need that. I'm going to fill the space with interesting Danny. We'd be traveling together, and anytime we came across a piano, he would sit down and start playing. And he's a classical pianist. So he'd be playing these, classical, and people would look around like, what's this guy? Where's he from? What's he doing? What's that? It's a plane. No, everybody knows it's a boat. How do you know? You can't see the whole thing. You don't have to. You see the front of it, that's a boat. I've seen boats before. It's a kind of a large one. I can compare it to the houses over here and say, yeah, it's a pretty big boat. I don't know what the rest of it looks like, but I know it's a boat. Okay, even though I can't see the whole thing. What's that? Yes, a tire. Okay, how do you know it's a tire? Well, it's tire tread. Do I have to see the whole tire? No, you don't have to. Here's one that's a little more complicated. What's this? Well, it's a palace, a building in Tivoli, over near Copenhagen. It's a gardens and amusement park, but it's the reflection, okay, in the pond. So again, let's give people a puzzle. Give them something interesting to look at. Sure, you could shoot that and they look at it and go, oh, that's pretty. Next. But if you give them this first, especially if you're doing telling a story, give them this first and they go, whoa, what is that? Oh, I think it's maybe and maybe not. And then you show them this and they go, oh yeah, that's what I figured it was. so keep them guessing at least a little bit, make it more interesting for them. What's your subject? Well, it's that green thing, right? Obvious. Well, what do you mean it's obvious? How can you tell? Well, that's what stands out in the picture. So you would call the blue the background, the blue and the white's the background, and the green thingy, whatever it is your subject. Okay, so foreground, background, subject, background, foreground, or figure and ground, as the psychologists call it. Okay, we call it subject and background. They call it figure and ground. Okay, so this is important for us as photographers in terms of making our subject clear. Here, no problem what the subject is. But there are times when even we can be confused, or our viewers can be confused about what in that picture exactly is your subject. What's the subject? What's the background? Okay, let's look at a couple confusing examples like almost optical illusions, and then we'll get on to pictures. Okay, what's that? Okay, if you look at the beak to the left, stare to the left, you probably see a duck. That's a duck's bill. But if you stare to the right, you should be able to see a rabbit. Okay, they change. You can't see both at the same time. Your brain won't let you do that. Okay, but whichever one you concentrate on, boom, your brain will switch over. Look to the right. Okay, in fact, block the bill with your hand if you have trouble seeing it, and just look at the eye and to the right. It's a rabbit. Okay, then block the back part, the right hand side with your hand, and you look at the bill and the eye. No doubt about it. It's a duck. Okay, so this one's confusing. What is it? Is it a duck or a rabbit? Okay, well, it depends. Your brain can see either one. How about this one? This was in the email that I sent out, so you already saw it. So you know that this is, you concentrate on the white areas. Well, first of all, concentrate on the dark areas. Let's do that. And it's a tree, looks like one of those trees from Africa. Okay, if you concentrate on the dark areas. Force yourself to concentrate on the white area and look what you get. Lion and gorilla. Pretty cool, pretty cool. It's a matter of what the brain sees, what the brain perceives, when you see the illustration. This is a classic, and I still struggle with this sometimes. First of all, I see a vase. That's obvious, okay? But if you want to see the face, concentrate on the white part over here the nose and the lips and the chin, and boom, it should pop for you that your brain switches and all of a sudden you see a woman's face. And same thing on this side. Okay, so there's like two women that are nose to nose, two people, nose to nose, and this happens to be the dark area in between their faces. This becomes the background. Oh, but when you look at it as a vase, it's a black vase against a white background. Wow, it flips. It flips. This one just bugs. This is kind of eerie, but depending on which way you look at this one, you get a different look. And I see a woman, red lips, nose, eye, facing to the left. What does anybody else see? Anybody want to comment on that one? I'm having trouble visualizing the other. Is the question, is she looking straight at us or is she looking to the left?
Straight at us. Half her face.
Okay. That one just, it's weird. That one bugs me. Okay, let's move on.
You have to start with the ear on that one, I think, Dennis.
The ear, like okay.
So pretend, look at that as if that's her left ear.
Oh, right.
I saw that in college one night.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. I don't know if that's an actual photograph or a Photoshop job. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. This one can be difficult to see too. Stare at this one a while, but try to look at it in two different ways. And maybe you've seen this one before, but nonetheless, see if you can switch. Even though I saw this before, today when I was looking at it, I had trouble making the switch. Okay. What do you see first? Give me a thumbs up if you see an old woman looking to the left. Okay. Now, how many of you see a pretty young girl looking to the upper left, to the back? Elaine? Okay. That one I find to be harder to see, but you can see the old woman. Here's her hair, and here's the eyelashes, and her nose, and her mouth, and her chin. But if you look at it the other way, this is the ear, an earring of a young lady who's looking back this way. Okay, so stare at this part and think of that as an eye, an ear and an earring, and an eye, and her hair, and she's looking back that way. Oh, this is her neckline, her chin. That one takes a little, but you have to concentrate. And that's what we're saying. When you're looking for pictures and you need to be intentional, you need to see things, look at shapes, and think of foregrounds and backgrounds and what might be perceived by the viewer. I want to thank Jim for this one. I saw this on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, so I got his permission to post it. But look carefully. Do you see icicles or do you see fingers? I was working on this presentation when I saw it on Facebook. I said, oh, look, I see a couple of fingers up here, up this, right in here. And of course, otherwise, it's just icicles hanging down, which could be icy fingers. But you get a different look. The question is, what's subject, what's background? And depending on how you look at it, it's a similar type of an illusion. Okay, Jim, thanks for letting me use that one. And that's a good example. Okay, so usually your goal as a photographer is to make your subject clear. Okay, you want everybody to know what you want them to see. You don't want them to be confused, maybe a little quizzical, keep them guessing a little bit sometimes with a puzzle, but you wanted to make it clear. In this example, there's no doubt about it. There's a lot of negative space. There's a boat and a buoy. Okay, so subject, background. No mistake about that. It's not confusing at all. Here's another one from Copenhagen. It's obvious the subject is the statue and the building is the background. There are lots of things to tell you that. And there's a lot of separation. Okay, there's color separation, you complementary colors, but obviously the statue stands out and boom, that becomes the subject of the picture. This one's a little more confusing. This is St. Petersburg, Russia. It's what they call the Savior of the Bloods Cathedral. And I photographed it as oh, do you already know what I did? Can you tell? Did I have you guessing a little bit? Photographed it as a reflection on the back of a Mercedes-Benz vehicle. This is the back windshield. So it's a reflection. So you see this and you see this and you go, whoa, what's going on here? What's the foreground? What's the subject? What's the background? Yeah. So my subject is the cathedral, and it was done as a reflection just to look a little bit, keep people guessing a little bit. Here's another one from the streets of New York City on a bright, sunny January day a number of years ago. And using the lines and the shadows, to create depth and leading lines into the subject who's looking in a store window here. So, I was reading Len's work one time, and Brooks Jensen, the editor, had this statement. And I thought, well, that's really insightful. And it sort of applies, in this case, that calligraphers train their eyes to see the paper rather than the ink. And that's what we were doing with those illusions, is we're training our eyes to see, in one case, a subject in a background, and then see it in a reversed manner. Okay, so Brooks Jensen. So the way you can help yourself make your subject stand out, make your subject more obvious. The research has been done on this, and David Duchemin, we heard David Duchemin a year ago present from Vancouver, Canada, and he has a book that is just wonderful. I've used it, I've had it in my library for years and years, called Within the Frame. And within that book, he presents some of the research that has been done by psychologists about what stands out, what attracts our attention. Or as Ian Plant says, what gives an object visual weight? It's important for us, because if you have a message in your photograph, and hopefully you want to say something with your photograph, then you want to direct the viewer's eye. You want them to see the subject. You want the subject to stand out. Well, how can you do that? Well, your subject will stand out if it's large. Obviously, they can't miss it if it's large. If it's bright. And that's where we get into digital dodging and burning. And Joe and I are going to do a session on this sometime in the future, using Lightroom or Photoshop or another program to brighten the objects in the scene that you want people to pay attention to, and to darken the ones you don't want them to pay attention to. So you change the visual weight of the objects in the scene in post. You can do it when you take the picture too, okay? Like if I'm doing somebody's portrait in a dark studio, I put a light on them, okay? Boom! That's where the saying comes from, you're in the spotlight. Well, it draws everybody's attention to you're in the spotlight. Okay, if you're sharp, so there's another technique you can do also. You can do it in the field with depth of field. Okay, that old limited depth of field trick. Make your subject sharp, make the background soft, blurry, bokeh. Okay. Or you can do it in post. Okay, in Photoshop, you go in and just blur the background a little bit, keep your subject sharp. Even iPhones now can do that. Well, the other models too, but iPhone in portrait mode, that's what it does. It takes two pictures, it combines them to a composite, and it blurs the background to give you that look of limited depth of field, okay? But it does it in a completely different way than we would do it with our traditional DSLRs and mirrorless cameras. We would set a large aperture and use a long focal length, okay, like 300, 200, and get fairly close to the subject. That would give you a sharp subject and a soft background, limited depth of field. Okay, if the subject has a contour rather than the being flat, higher in contrast, so you can do that in post also. Recognizable, okay, because if our brain perceives an object and thinks it recognizes it, it's going to be drawn to it, okay, like that eye of the lion hiding in the bushes. Yeah, you're going to be drawn to that. If you think it's a lion, you're going to be alerted to that potential danger. If you, birders, if you see a bird, a little movement in a bush, okay, you can perceive that as a whole bird and often recognize what type of bird it is just from seeing a little bit of it and a little bit of movement, or when they take off, there's signs there. Anyway, and people, if there's a person in your picture, no matter how small, okay, your viewers are going to see because it's recognizable and we relate to other people. So keep those factors in mind when you're taking your pictures. And if you want to enhance them and give your subject increased visual weight, okay, you do that in post. Okay? Do it when you're shooting and enhance it in post. Okay. This is in Copenhagen, and these colorful boats. And you can see that your attention is drawn immediately to which boat? What is my subject here? Just answer to yourself. Which one do you think is my subject? Boom, yeah, this one. It's bigger, it's in the foreground, and it's orangish. Well, you know what? Those warmer colors draw our attention more, and we perceive them to be closer to us, okay? That's why brake lights are red, okay? You perceive warmer colors to be closer to you, so they want to give you that advanced warning, okay? But here, this appears to be the subject because it's closer, it's larger, and it's bright. It's a bright orange, a warm color. Now, let's say that I took this picture like this, and then I get back and I say, well, yeah, but I want people to notice this boat in the back because I met the owner of that boat and he had some interesting stories that I'm going to tell you. Yeah. And I say, well, what can I do in post that would alter the visual weight to draw your attention to this boat instead of that boat? How about that? When you look at that image, does your eye automatically drift over to the pink boat to the right? Okay, took it in Photoshop, put on a black and white layer, and then used a layer mask and brought back some of the color, okay, and changed the color too. See, changed the color, brought back the color in the boat on the right, but I made it a warmer color instead of a cooler color. Okay, again, trying to draw your attention to that boat done in post. Okay, let's move on. Let's go to another compositional principle. Again, I'm going to show you an image, give you a second to look at it. You tell yourself what you see. 1, 2, 3. Okay, what did you see? You think about it. I was going to do this with chat, and I changed my mind. I was going to have everybody write in chat what you see, and I thought, well, who's going to monitor chat, and how much time is that going to take? We'd be here till 10 o'clock. So we'll just have it. You do the exercise to yourself. Let's look at it again. What did you see? Well, you saw a triangle in the middle because it's different. It stood out. You see a bunch of blue blocks and a bunch of blue dots, but the blue dots are perceived by your brain as being a triangle. So you probably, even back here when you looked at it, I'll bet you saw a triangle. Now, you might have realized they were dots, but they stood out and formed a shape that differentiated itself from its surroundings. So you saw a triangle. Okay, let's do it again. Another one. Okay, did you see 36 dots? Well, you did, but you didn't, realize they were 36 dots, did you? Did you see a series of straight vertical lines? Let's look at it again. Did you see vertical lines? I'll bet not. I'll bet you saw a series of 6 horizontal lines. Okay, look at it again and force yourself to follow a vertical line. You do. You have to force yourself to look up and down because the natural tendency is to go from left to right and go back and forth. Well, why? Well, because of similarity. Okay. Yeah, these are all yellow. Those are all blue. Those are, yeah. That just takes your eye right across. You can't help it. It's a natural tendency that psychologists have discovered. Okay. And we can use that in our photographs to improve our compositions. Okay. It's called the similarity principle. Because those dots were all blue, you follow the blue along and then you follow the yellow along. So you saw horizontal lines, not vertical lines. Similarity principle. Okay. What do you see here? I see snow geese. I was down at Middle Creek. Yes. Well, I see a group and your brain perceives them to be one group. It's a group. Are there 4? Yeah, there are 4 if I take the time to count them. But the first thing I realize is it's a group of snow geese. Okay, I see one group. Okay, here I see some guys looking at the snow geese. They're getting ready to take some pictures. They're one group of West Shore Photography Club photographers. Okay, on last Wednesday down at Middle Creek, and this guy in the background, he doesn't seem to be part of the group. Okay, because these 3 are up here together. Okay, they're perceived as being together. They're similar. They're dressed similarly. Yeah, they're part of one group. Okay, these ice cream cones that do not yet have ice cream in them are perceived by your brain as being a group of cones, waffle cones. Now, do you immediately realize there are 8 of them? No. But if you take the time, you could count them, but they're perceived as being a group because they're similar. They go together. What do you see there? Okay, moving on to a different principle. Okay, your brains, again, naturally group, but in this case, look, all the dots are the same. They're identical blue dots. They just happen to be separated into 2 groups. What do you mean separated? Well, there's some distance, okay? So our brains see that as being 2 distinct groups, okay? And that's called the proximity principle, okay? 2, 4, 6, 8. You see 2 groups. And if you count, you can tell there are 8 in each group, but you don't see them as 16 dots together, even though they're all exactly the same. Okay, proximity principle. They don't even have to be the same to be grouped. Here you have a cluster of different objects, but because they're in different corners, your brain sees them as 2 groups of things, 2 groups of objects. I don't know what they are. They're just geometric shapes, but they're perceived as 2 groups. Let's apply that to photographs. I was in Helsinki and I went up and talked. I was, smiled and talked to these girls. And I says, "You okay to take your picture?" And the one girl on the right backed away and she was shy. She didn't want to have her picture taken, but I got it anyway. But look what happened. Your brain now perceives as there's something up here. There's 2 groups. There's these two girls on the left and then this girl on the right. Are they not friendly or what's the situation? So your brain immediately, because they're separated, sees them as 2 separate entities. Here, there's my brother Chip. We're over in Copenhagen taking a ride on the boat. And you look at this picture and you say, well, there's 2 groups of people. Well, yes, that's how your brain perceives them. There's 5 people there. These are friends we were with. That's my wife, Joyce. And there's Karen, Chip's wife, who happens to be married to Joyce. Anyway, there's 2 groups of people. They're sitting together and they're sitting together. So they're perceived as being 2 separate groups. What your brain implies? Well, there's there's more a closer relationship between these guys, and there's a close relationship between these 2 guys, these 2 people, but not as close a relationship with them. Okay, so what your brain perceives implies some things about the relationships. Here's this is a Pennsylvania Capitol Steps. We'll be there on Wednesday. It's a wedding I did a bunch of years ago, and it's the way I grouped the people. Okay, these are her parents, so they're together. Okay, they have a strong bond, and bride and groom, they have a strong bond, and there's some distance between these 2 separate groups. Okay, I didn't put them all together because they don't have equal, standing at this point. They're 2 separate groups. This was in Copenhagen, and this is an interesting combination of the 2 principles. Here we have, it's a billboard, okay? And then in front, of course, you have bicycles. But because all these bicycles are similar, okay, we have like the continuity principle in effect where, they create an implied line, horizontal line that goes across this way. Similarly, the faces of these people, okay, create an implied line that go along this way. But there's a separation between these 2. Proximity, there's a difference in space between these 2. So your brain perceives a line here and a line here that are separate. So your eye might go across up here and then come down and go across this way. Okay, so the continuity principle takes your eye across, and the proximity principle jumps you from one to the other because there's some distance between them. Okay, rolling right along. Hey, the other thing I'm concerned about tonight, since I've never done this before, is how long it's going to take. So I think we're making good time. Hopefully by 8:30, we'll be finished, if not shortly after that. Okay, what symbol do you see in this next slide? Oh, yep, jumps right out at you, doesn't it? In what was it, 1967, This building was built by the U.S. Navy out in Coronado Island in San Diego. And I don't know why the architect didn't think about this, but from an aerial view, it looks like a Nazi swastika. Okay. Now, it looks that way to us because we have a familiarity with that symbol. We've seen it before. It's in our brains, and you see it, and well, yeah, that's what it, well, no, that's not what it is. It's a building. Just happens to be built that way. Yes, but our brain perceives that as being that symbol. So we have to be careful in some cases. And in this case, the architects weren't very careful with that. And I think in the meantime, they've done some things to disguise it. They were trying to use the shrubbery, the brush and stuff. But anyway, okay, what do you see in this slide? It's a fire-breathing animal. Yeah, again, people see shapes in clouds and see things, but in this case, you've got some kind of animal breathing fire, apparently, or at least that's what our brain perceives. What is it? Well, actually, it's clouds and illuminated from behind, backlit by the sun, okay, the setting sun. Okay, what do you see here? This is kind of cute, I thought. And these couple aren't my pictures. Most of the other ones were, except for the lion at the beginning. But yeah, looks like a woman, figure of a woman in the orange. Okay. So this phenomena, pareidolia, is being or perceiving things that aren't really there. Yeah, it's part of this whole idea of what we perceive is sometimes not what is actually there. It's what our brain makes up because it's familiar with certain things and it makes associations, which it's good most of the time, but it can get you in trouble too. Okay, what do you see here? Looks like a face, right? 2 eyes, a nose, and a big, smiling mouth. Okay, all because of our familiarity, the similarity of shapes that we can take advantage of for a humorous effect sometimes. Now, in terms of design, compositional design, the way we arrange things makes a big difference as to how people feel about it. If you go back to my title slide for this presentation, that's the way I laid it out. Okay, and a few graphic designers, you already are very, very familiar with all these concepts. But what if I redesigned it and made it look something like this? Oh man, whew, you graphic designers just shaking your heads going, no, that wouldn't do. That doesn't look very good. It's the same information, right? It just, this is more appealing. Well, why is that? Why is it more appealing? Well, I don't know. It has something to do with the way the brain perceives it and with balance and with symmetry. Oh, okay. Well, let's talk about balance and symmetry. Okay, that's the old yin yang symbol that used to be you'd see a lot back in the 60s. Dynamic balance. Do your photographs have a feel that they're balanced, or do your viewers go like this when they're looking at your pictures? Okay. According to Ian Plant, and I love Ian, so I quote him a lot. Dynamic balance is the harmonious union of energetic visual elements, keeps the viewer's eye moving through the composition. So as we said earlier, if you can keep somebody engaged in your picture, it's more successful. They spend more time with it. They find it more entertaining, more enlightening. Okay? So dynamic balance usually helps, unless, of course, you're the type of person that wants to establish some kind of tension, like war photographers or press reporters sometimes do things intentionally, just the opposite, to create an imbalanced image, which cause tension in the viewers, because that's the feeling they want them to have. So what you try to do, as I implied earlier, is to establish a walk a fine line, I should say. And Ian gets into this a lot in his class. You want a fine line between order and chaos, energy and balance, symmetry and asymmetry, harmony and discord. Okay, you want your photo to be like complex enough to keep the viewer interested, but not so complex that they get frustrated and discouraged and give up on it. Okay? Here's a very simple image. It's a balanced composition. Okay, it's very stable, but quite frankly, it's not very interesting unless you know something historically about this anchor. this symbol. Okay. So, but compositionally, I'm not, it's not very dynamic. You look at a composition like this, it's more dynamic. The statue's off to the side. You get some color, got some limited depth of field there, the blur in the foreground, and the statue's looking this way. So supposedly a runner. So I left more room on this side for him to run into. At least you can imagine the statue, the Olympian running into the garden this way. So a more dynamic composition and a little bit unbalanced, because there's much more visual weight over on this side than there is over on this side, okay? But it's balanced out a bit by the fact that there's more space on this side. So yes, you have the statue here, but it's over on this side, and there's more stuff on this side to tend to balance it out. Just some things to think about, when you're taking your pictures. You get back to that image again. It's unbalanced, it's chaotic, there's a lot going on, and it leads you out of the picture. So kind of interesting in some ways, but compositionally not really effective. Here we get back to shapes. It's a very balanced composition. And you look at all the shapes just like the other building, lots of squares and rectangles. In fact, some ovals, partial ovals, circles, circle there, the red light, all sorts of shapes that form patterns that keep your eye moving around and keep it interesting. And by the way, when you think about where your eye goes, does your eye go down here to the bicycle a lot? Is it pulled right down there? Yeah, well, mine is, partly because it's red, okay? That red color just attracts our attention, has a lot of visual weight. Here's a dynamically balanced composition, again in Copenhagen. The boat big in the foreground, balanced by a colorful, background, a lot of leading lines, gives you a good feeling of depth. Busy, but balanced. Okay, stuff going on all sides of the picture there. I've intentionally worked my way around looking for, I wanted the Ferris wheel, but I also wanted this Buddha statue. And I was trying to get a balanced composition where the two, balance one another. And you got the stacks back here too. So you've got a couple of things going on and some nice shapes, a differentiation in shapes that make it for a more interesting image. That one I showed you before, but I'd cut it off. I cropped it a little bit. If I include the whole picture, now you see you have another object back here which draws your eye. Here's a visual anchor. So now your eye is going to go, and I don't have the sailboat up front. So now your eye is going here and here and back here. So again, it creates an implied triangle, but with a different anchor back here, different subject. Okay, we're wrapping it up now. Just to summarize, and this is a lot of information, so I will send you a copy, email tomorrow, a copy of this whole PowerPoint presentation, and just so you have this to summarize it. These are the principles that I talked about: continuity, closure, figure ground, similarity, proximity, object recognition, that pareidolia, and balance. Okay, so you can look at that in more detail if you want. If you're interested, there's a name to all of this, as some of you already have guessed. It's called Gestalt Theory. Joe warned me not to start the presentation or include Gestalt Theory in the title, or no one would show up. But there was a psychologist back in 1935, a German guy, Kurt Kafka, who started this whole movement. He said that the whole is other than the sum of the parts. He didn't say greater than. Okay, that gets confused sometimes. He said other than, but that's what this is all about. It's, if you want to put it under one, umbrella, it's a part of Gestalt theory. So if you want to do more research on your own, I have some resources there for you. These are some of the places I went to get the information for this PowerPoint presentation. And if you're interested, you can follow those through. So, hey, it's not even 8:30 yet. I did well. So guys, that's it. You can unmute yourself if you will have any questions or comments for me. And of course, there's my contact information, my email address again. Please do me a favor. I want to know how this came across. Send me an email and let me know how you feel. But just for the group now, go ahead with comments or questions.
Dennis, that was excellent. Absolutely excellent.
Good
I just
Thanks.
thoroughly enjoyed it. You know, the
Thank
Gestalt
you,
scared the
Dennis.
crap out of me, but you settled that down real quick.
I know. Well, thanks for the advice on Gestalt theory. I thought I'd wait till the end and throw it up there.
Thank you, Dennis. We're all
Thank
a
you very
little bit
much.
smarter.
You're welcome, Diane.
Thank you very
Dennis.
much.
Okay.
Dennis,
Yes.
Well done, Dennis.
Terry.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead,
Dennis.
Terry.
on the picture you showed of the tree and the gorilla,
Yes.
and at the bottom there were fish.
Oh, okay. I probably missed those. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. You might want to go back.
It looks like there's an ocean wave there, and the two fish are jumping to the right.
Well, see, that's an interesting observation too, because you perceived that. I missed that. Okay. And again, as photographers, you did a good job. Your brain picked that out for some reason. My brain didn't. I didn't see the fish. Very interesting.
Dennis, I'm holding up a book here. I don't know if you can-
That is excellent. I have a copy.
Isn't it wonderful? And
read the title and the author for people who aren't
it is
sure.
Molly Bang, and it's called Picture This, How Pictures Work. And it's basically, from a graphical standpoint, what Dennis was talking about. And it is, you can get it for about $6 used, which is what I would suggest.
I'll send a link in the email tomorrow.
It's a great book.
Yeah, it is. And I did use that one, but I didn't put it in the references. She just uses little graphical diagrams and pictures, and then goes through some of these concepts. She does a wonderful job. Okay. Anything else? Any thoughts?
Yeah, Dennis, that picture that you were sailed a few times for poor composition, the houses on the side of the hill.
Yes.
How would you compose that better if you were there and wanted to capture that moment?
I would have a parachuter jumping down from a plane. No. That's a good question. Good question. I'm not sure. I'd look for something in the foreground or something else that was interesting. Probably be in a different camera position. It's some way to draw, to have a visual anchor down in the right-hand corner that would bring the eye down and back around. Okay. But if you really want to get into some depth with this, Ian Plant's course is wonderful. He goes through all this stuff in great depth, has videos you can watch, and a 250-page ebook that you get with it. Really, really good stuff. A lot of people underestimate the importance of camera position, but I think Ansel Adams once said, he's quoted as saying how important the camera position is, but just moving it, lower, higher, or left to right to change that composition and the relationship between objects. And then, of course, using different focal length lenses, like I mentioned the wide angle lens to emphasize objects in the foreground. So if you want objects to look closer together, use a telephoto lens. You want to separate them more, give them some distance, use a wide angle lens. All depends on what story you want to tell as to how you arrange those and what focal length you use.
Dennis, hi, Rich Carr.
Hey, Rich.
I played golf today, and whenever I muff the ball or get a bad hit, it was because I forgot rules 10 through 12 of the 16 different things I'd have to do. It's a little bit similar to photography. I think one of the difficulties, what you had to present was wonderful, amazing stuff. But I think one approach to this is that it can be intimidating. I think particularly when people, newer photographers, and all of us who've been at it for a while, are thinking of all the ways we're setting up our camera, where our position is, what the f-stop is. It's so many things to think about.
Right.
I think one way to approach or get to what you're saying is you're right about perception. Is to take your pictures like you normally do, but look at them in post-production and think through why did you take that picture? What is it that you see? Because I think your main point is we do see things. But if we try to set ourselves up, I think, too early in the process of trying to see where the triangles are, see where the lines are, which are important, but that takes a lot of skill and a lot of time, I think, experience. So anyway, my point is, what I try to do is that I grab a picture because I grab a picture. And then when I look at it, whatever I see, then I see what I really saw back then in terms of angles and all that kind of thing. And then sometimes I will crop it in order to get that kind of effect. So my whole point is that I think it's good not to be intimidated to have to try to set up what you're looking for in terms of all of these things. Let your mind do it and then look at it and let it teach you. So over time, I think you're going to be able to see these things that you're talking about. Does that make sense?
I wholeheartedly agree that it's not something that comes easily or quickly. And the more pictures you look at, the more you analyze pictures, not only yours, but other people's pictures, the more intuitively you'll see these things.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're somebody like Clyde McGreary, he'll look at the painter that we have critique sometimes. I mean, he looks and he sees congruent triangles and this and overlapping this and nothing's an actual object to him. They're all geometric shapes and lines. But the more you think about it, and as Rich said, certainly analyze your pictures after you get them, because very rarely am I seeing all this stuff. You know, when I take a picture, I'll see something. And who was the guy who talked with us, Joe, who said triggers? He did video. He says something. Pardon me.
I forget.
Yeah, he says something will trigger your brain to say, "Oh, there's a picture there," but then you got to work the scene. You might know that there's a picture somewhere there, but then you have to say, "Okay, well, what is it that I want to emphasize? How am I going to do this? What do I see?" But often I take a picture, then when I go back and look at it, as you say, Rich, I realize, oh, look, there triangles, there's this, there's that, and I'm analyzing it and seeing more than I actually saw when I took the picture.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. But I think one last point is, my point, I think, too, is that when we take the picture, we see an enormous a lot of things that we're not conscious of, which is your point.
Right.
I think later when we see the picture, in a sense, we see what we saw, but we didn't bring it into our brain in a certain way. That's
right.
I think
yeah,
that's
you realize
you're making the same point.
Yep.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Yeah, it becomes more intuitive the more you practice.
For the experienced photographers, this is important because you have reminded us what we knew, but we forgot what we knew we knew.
There you go. Some people don't know what they don't know, and some people don't know what they knew before. Yeah.
But it is a reminder to look at your own photographs and, you know, all of this stuff. There are a lot of terms that you use that you're teaching us that I never heard before.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
Oh, give me an example.
Well, hold on, I made a note.
Sometimes I teach, you know, this stuff, and it's so much that I think it's all old hat, and then I realize,
like the closure principle. I never heard that.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, that's part of Gestalt theory. Yeah. So.
Oh well.
Yeah,
I never heard of Gestalt. Well, I heard Gestalt, but I couldn't tell you what it was.
Yeah, and my purpose there was to not get bogged down with names of all these Gestalt principles, but to give you the general gist of how we perceive and how that can be used to help you compositionally.
And there were a couple other principles that I wrote down that I had never heard before.
Okay.
But so, yes, it's informative regardless of what stage you're in as photography.
Okay, thanks, Diane.
Dennis, this is Dave Marchetto, and
hi, Dave.
This presentation is so important, and it reminds me of my famous detective Sherlock Holmes, what he said to Dr. Watson. You see, Watson, but you do not observe.
Yeah. Very good. Very good.
I think what your presentation does is, it just reminds me of that. It's really well done.
Well, thanks. That was nice. Cute. Anybody else? Okay, guys, let's wrap it up. Please give me some feedback, if you will. And keep in mind, Wednesday, going to the Capitol. You can join Joe down at Middle Creek sometime if you want. And next Monday night, we'll be on board with Still Lives with Betsy, whatever her last name is.
And by the way, 22 people use Facebook on a regular basis. 8 of them say no, and 3 of them said maybe sometimes.
Okay. And my approach on that is, if I have something I really want everybody to see, I'll send it out via an email through MailChimp. That way, everybody should get it. I see Facebook as reinforcing a message for those people who are on Facebook. So I don't rely, I never post something exclusively on Facebook. It's just a secondary communication channel, you might say. Okay, any final comments?
Thank you very much, Dennis.
Okay, you're welcome. You're welcome, guys. That was fun.
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks.
Okay, guys.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you very much and good night.
Nice job,
Good
Dennis.
night.
Thanks.
Good night, everybody.